Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to another Scrum Wednesday. This week we have a fellow colleague PST and, like I earlier mentioned, product owner rockstar Ralph Yocum. I hope I pronounced that well. Thanks. What could I say? He is literally the man who wrote the book on product owners and how to do it properly. He is a long-standing professional Scrum trainer, one of the stewards for the professional Scrum product owner course. Anything other than that would it's just details. I think he has quite a rich career. Without further ado, please, Ralph, take over and feel free to start anytime.
Okay, great. So maybe let me just share my screen. I could make it something's easier for you. Just go around here doing the same thing. Okay. So yeah, I mean, Bogdan just mentioned, and thanks for the great introduction. So that's me. I turned Agile about 20 years ago, first through extreme programming when I was my background is IT, kind of computer science for being a programmer. And then I discovered extreme programming. Through extreme programming, I came to Scrum, and Keith is somewhere here in the audience. He had the book of Ken Schwaber on his desk. So this was around 2002, I think, if I remember correctly. Since 2010, I'm a trainer with Scrum.org. I'm one of the first trainers in Europe. In the beginning, I worked also closely together with Ken Schwaber a lot. And I not only wrote the book on my own, Don McGreal, he's the co-author, which you can see his name here. He's also a PST. He's based in Dallas, Texas, and we wrote the book together remotely, which was a good experience. So that's also something which was helping me to cope with the COVID situation we're having here right now. But again, this is enough about myself. So let's go more into the details about kind of what we will be doing today. So is every one of you on the mural? Can you maybe just give me a thumb up? Some of you have not your camera on or something like that. So let me just put it this way. So some people are using the thumb up feature in Zoom, which is also great. So I'm just expecting that you're on the mural. Well, I also share my screen, but if you just look at my shared screen, you wouldn't be able to participate. And my intention is essentially for us to do some exercises as well. I'm more like a hands-on person. I don't like kind of death by PowerPoint or something like that. So without any further ado, I'll be going back to and stop. Am I still sharing my screen, by the way? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. There's one thing I don't like about Zoom, and it's the window management. It's really a mess. Windows pop up at all weird places. So I will create breakout rooms right now, and I just do it randomly. So each one of you would probably be assigned to one room, and I plan to have 3-4 people per room. Let me just do some quick math. We have, let's say, 4 participants, 3 to 4 participants, so 11 breakout rooms. So what we will be doing right now is this exercise, and I made ample space so that we have enough space for all the teams. So I think that should work out. So if I would ask you, hey, successful project, what would you say makes a project successful? What would you look for? Or successful product, what would you look for that? So kind of a successful product is when this and this, or a successful project was if something like that. So this is kind of the idea. And I will send you into your breakout rooms for 5 minutes. You see this time down here. And so basically just discuss it in your teams. You might have somebody English speaker, so then basically your language would be English. But I guess pretty much all of us. I'm talking English anyway, so I expect that that this shouldn't be a problem anyway. So enough talking. Go and send any questions about the exercise before I send you into the breakout rooms. So I'll kick off the breakout rooms right now. They are now here. Maybe you saw the window. I click open our rooms, and then I start the timer, which is here on the main mirror. And I give you 5 minutes. So I first open the rooms. And oh, looks like everybody is coming back. And something totally unrelated to my presentation. I wouldn't mind if you would turn on your video camera unless you do something inappropriate, but it's for me easier if I see someone kind of a little bit of a facial expression. Okay, so it looks like everybody is back. Now let's look at what you have created here. Let me zoom in a little bit. And let's point out a couple of things which are sticking out here for me. So we have like agreement fulfillment on time, on scope, on budget. Scope here again. Team has collaborated, final increment is delivered and accepted, team is satisfied. So here we have a little bit like short-term customer satisfaction. Whatever makes my sponsor happy, like the person kind of giving the money, sending out the contract, and so on. So essentially, what I just want to point out here is the following: is if we go back to this triangle, like scope, schedule, and then here we would have budget. So essentially, and this is kind of an interesting concept, because if you think about it, scope is a commitment. We will deliver that. And this is something also you wrote down further up. Now, schedule is a forecast. We think this is what we will be doing. They are different things, and then we unify them through one budget against which we will get measured. So things which are not really aligned that much, which are actually orthogonal, we put together through one budget, and then we communicate this to the outer world. And then it's basically, we delivered on time, on scope, and on budget, and then we did a good job. And that's what a project manager is there for, making sure this actually happens. In my trainings, what I usually ask, like not yet, but around July, August, I ask them, so who of you is already preparing the budget request for next year? Hands are going up, September more, usually by October it's done. So essentially that means by September, October, you told someone in your company what you will be doing next year, how long it will take, and how much it will therefore cost. And then based on that, get the money. And then you get measured against keeping time, scope, and budget. This has a huge impact on your chance of being agile, because you really kind of give them something. Essentially, the shackles go in your hands, and then you get measured against that. And for me, the way budgets are being spoken within a company have a really huge impact about how actual you can really be. Is it possible? Just as a side note. So for me, like, the way budget, and there's some companies that have really creative, innovative approaches there, which an interesting thing is that if asking, so how are these approaches working for you? Just actually great, we spend less money. So this is kind of the classical project mindset we usually see. But now let's go over there and let's look into what makes a product successful. So we have value added, we have happy customer, we have whatever makes the customer happy, happy customer here again, long-term customer satisfaction in regards to short-term customer satisfaction, value, kind of again. And this is more interesting. I think this is more important for a company to do that, create happy customers. And like Peter Drucker said, the only reason for management to exist is to create customers. So that's your purpose. And how do you create customers? By creating products which are valuable, which solve a problem, make something easier, less stressful for you. And if people have that, they talk about it, and you will sell more product. And guess what? You probably will make more money. So essentially, the way you can think about that is, let's say there's somewhere here the market. You can see that. And based on looking at that, we come up with and let me just actually go ahead and use this light bulb here, which comes into the kind of handy. So then you have that, you come up with an, this is weird. Sometimes the I just had I was teaching a class today and I had a Spanish lady in my class and she said, no, this is pronounced morale. So I'm practicing that. So you come up with an idea and then you really quickly want to turn that into a product as quickly as possible and bring it into the market. And once you do that, you get feedback. You get either feedback like, yes, it's great, or it's no, it's not great. And if you check off this one, beautiful. I mean, you did something which you thought is right and it proved to be right. You learn from that, it has value. But maybe the answer is, no, it's not great. Bummer. But on the other hand, you learned at least it was wrong. You can take something about that. And by doing this, we establish basically our feedback loop, which we need. And if you look into kind of like Scrum is an empirical approach, Agile overall is kind of empirical. And if you look into a dictionary, empirical means guided by experimentation and learning. It's kind of, this is what we want to establish. And now if you take that idea to Scrum, that probably explains to you why we have a role called product owner and not project owner. Because the product owner is there to really maximize value by optimizing everything around him, like how he works with the development team, how he engages with the stakeholders, collects feedback, and does all of these things which are important. Okay, so kind of this is an important aspect here. Now, we talked about products are probably more relevant than projects in regards to value, customer satisfaction, the way we approach and collect feedback and handle things. But that brings up the next question. What actually is a product? And by now you know the routine. I'll send you for 5 minutes into your breakout room again. And I'd like you to think about what is a product, okay? Keith, you want to say something or?
So I don't think we're all familiar with Zoom. A lot of us will use Microsoft Teams. We had no one in our group who knew how to interact with the system, and we didn't have any anonymous animals.
Okay. I thought about that because I didn't explain the tool at all, and I thought, oh, people are busy, they're using it. So essentially, if you go to the left-hand side, and let me give you a quick rundown, you see this thing where it looks like a little bit of peel off of a Post-it. And here you have your sticky notes, and you can just basically drag and drop them over there. And the other thing is, once you have used a sticky note and you type something on there, you can just press tab and quickly hammer out those Post-its if you want to do that. Okay, that's pretty much what you need to do, nothing else. If you don't like the location, you can drag and drop them around, or you can select them and delete them. That's pretty much it. Anything else I should be explaining? But thanks for bringing it up, Keith. That's a good point. Well, I give you 5 minutes for that exercise. Discuss in your group what is actually a product, okay? And with that, I open the rooms and I start. Okay, great. So many ideas. I think everybody is back, so let's move on then. So, and let's look at a couple of things you have written down here. So I think what's really nice is I think a product usually solves a problem. If you think about a car, it solves the problem of transport. If you, any problem you can think about solves or helps you with something, and in that regard, it satisfies also a need, customer problem we have again, value to the customer in some way. It could be a physical, or it could be also a service. A product doesn't have to be a physical product. It could be anything which provides you essentially with value. It's long lasting. That means, let me just go here. So as long as you have the product, you have to have someone who takes care of that. In this regard, you should have a product backlog for that product if you think in terms of Scrum, and also a product owner and maybe a couple of people. Then we have value here again. And then we have problem fixed again, value to someone. And I think I saw some other place where it's kind of like, well, it's flowing and evolving because it's long lasting, that's for sure. Thing which a customer needs. And I can't find it anymore. But again, there was something else that it's kind of a long lasting thing. So the product, the thing is a project is a temporary thing. You start it and you stop it. And you discover that there's something wrong with the product. But at this point, you would have to start a new project to work on that. But the budget for next year is already spoken. So we have to wait another year until we get there and things like that. So it's kind of like, as long as there's a product, we have a few people who have to have an eye on that. If it's more like in maintenance mode, if it's still on the full development, sure, there will be more people working on that. But a good way to really think about a product solves a problem. It makes something easier for you. Now the question often is like, what really is a product? I mentioned, these days, maybe some of you drove to work this morning or some other place. On the steering wheel these days, you have those buttons. Is one of those buttons a product? Would you say yes or no? Is a button on a steering wheel a product? I see some no, I see no again. I think it is a perfect product because somebody builds it and somebody buys it, and it solves a problem because I build steering wheels and I need buttons on it. So yes, these buttons come in handy, I buy them. No, but is a steering wheel a product? I guess, but now the answer is, you figured it out, it's yes. Who of you bought a steering wheel on its own? Maybe it's one of you kind of tinkerers, kind of working on a car. But overall, no, you don't really do that. You usually buy a car because a car is something which really solves a problem for you because it solves a problem to getting from A to B. And and you can solve this problem maybe in other ways as well. You could take a bus, you could walk, take a bike, or maybe a plane, whatever is the most appropriate. So this is kind of the way you can think about a product. You need to find the right level of abstraction for your product. And far too often, we don't think in products. If we talk about product owners and product backlogs, we think more like on a smaller level. So let me just draw something down here. And I'd like to maybe get rid of some of those post-its here. So there is a cat or something on there. If you could just be not on this area so that I can delete it, so that I have a little bit more space. So someone of you who is kind of on this one here. Anyway, so I'll then try to draw a little bit smaller. So what I usually observe is the following, is that within a company, we often see the following. So a classical company hierarchy, no surprises here. But let's say this company actually is working with Scrum, which is, yes, this is a good beginning. And for that reason, they also have in each one of those areas a product backlog. And for that reason, they also hopefully have a product owner. So this bubble here means this is the product owner. Now they have to do something. Let's say they have a bigger initiative they need to cover. So there is this big chunk of work which needs to be done. Now they will break it down and just say, hey, you do this, and then you give it to them. And then you do this, and then you give it to them. So you would see then probably something like that is happening here. Okay. Now what happens in that case, we serialize our workflow with many, many handovers. Whenever we have handovers, we are actually seeing a queuing theory getting alive. So queues means that there is a pile of work which somebody works from, and then this pile grows and shrinks, but there's always like, and if something is added to it, it's at the bottom of the pile until it moves up, and then somebody starts to work from it again. Now, what do you pass over normally? It's documents. And if you're a really good writer, you can probably get 30% of your knowledge on paper. If you could really get 80% out, it's a very lossy process. So we have handovers of documents where we lose information. We have all the queues, or the backlogs in between them, which basically people will work out of that again and again and again. And at the end, we get a product which is probably not the right product. It's a little bit like the Chinese whisper game, which we played as a child. And this is not everything, because then we have other things also happening within our company. Let's say we have then the next product we need to work on. The next thing. And the next thing. So now if you look at this, I'm not showing the right area on my screen here right now. So now if you look at this again, essentially what does it mean? If you look at, let's say for the right product here, this team has nothing to do for a really, really long time, but they need to justify their existence. So they do non-important work until they have something to do. They need to look busy. Over here, they have nothing to do at all. They probably actually go ahead and invent some work to look busy as well. This is often all this politics and stuff like that happens. And then all the other products come in here, and then there would be a situation where I just say, hey, Nejma, you promised me I will get that thing. And he would tell me, well, yes, I would have if Lucas would have given it to me. And I say, but Lucas, why didn't you give it? Yeah, because Mita didn't give it to me. So this is when the blaming game starts. Everybody blames everyone. Well, we would have if they would have. Because you have this huge dependencies network going on. And then often the answer is, yeah, we do Scrum. It doesn't really work. And the problem is that it's not about how many Scrum teams you have, how many product owners you have. It's about finding and identifying the right level of abstraction for your products. Go back to the buttons, steering wheel, car. You know, Tesla bought a car factory from Toyota in Fremont, California. I could even go ahead and just say, actually, a plant is a product. It solves a problem for Tesla. Now they can build cars. But I don't want to buy a plant. I want to buy a car. So you don't go too high. You should go as high as possible, but don't go too high. So now with that in mind, if you look at this, and let me just scroll it up a little bit. You need to identify your right products. Let's say here we have a product, and we need to find out what are all the teams and skills we need to build this product. So each one of those circles in here with those dots would be developers and development teams, for which we then also have a product owner and a product backlog. So now we have something beautiful. We have a product which is self-contained. It's decoupled from everything else. Now this product can navigate in a natural way. They see something happening on the market. Oh, let's do this. They implement the feature. Hey, and this is again where done from Scrum comes into the picture. As long as they can say, hey, we are done, all is good. They can make a next release. And you also said something up there. A product is something we can release. Yeah. So a plan, that's nothing you can release. It's like this real tangible product. So this product now, by definition, has a chance to be agile, but it's not as straightforward, I'm afraid, because then you have the next product here. I'm just drawing this here quickly. You get the idea. Product owner, product backlog, and then the other product here as well. And so on. So this is more like a realistic scenario. That means we have products and they have interdependencies. Again, we try to minimize them. We probably can't get completely rid of them. Now, let's say we have this dependency here. And this means the yellow and the blue product there. I'm not talking to you, Siri. So they have a dependency. And this doesn't mean that there is one team working for the two products. that means that those two products share maybe a component, a database, a CMS system, or something like that. And with this, we mean that everybody should be able to change things as they see fit, but not break it. That means like, I'm allowed to play with your toy. I cannot break it. I have to be careful about it. So let's say the yellow product wants to make some changes here in this area. So I would expect that they go over here and talk to those people here, you know. And if you remember from the Agile Manifesto, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, they would just say, hey, Goran, let's talk. You know, we need some changes. Let's figure out how we can do that it works for us, and it's still okay for you. And let's sit together. Let's come up with that. So they would do that. They would talk about it. Maybe they do a code review together, something like that. And at some point, the yellow team would say, you know what, we're going to make a check-in. And they say everything is working, and the blue team says everything is still working. Or maybe they say, oh, something broke. And they would then look into that, roll back the changes, look into that again until everything is working again. The approach would be similar in these areas here as well. And here, nothing. But now in the center, this is what I like to think about. These are the crown jewels that must never be broken. If this thing is broken, the company probably has a real problem. So essentially, that means we have to somehow build a fence around that to make sure nothing bad happens to that. The simplest answer is, oh, let's make a component team. Let's make one team which main purpose is to change and maintain that core component. But this also means they get their own product backlog. So I would go to them and just say, hey, I would need a change. And they would say, yes, Rolf, tell it to us. Oh, yes, sure, we can do that. No problem. 5 weeks. I need it now. No, 5 weeks. Because again, it goes into the backlog, it's down at the bottom, and eventually goes up and it gets implemented. So what I want to tell you here is that if we have this component thinking, a component team is always a bottleneck. It causes delays. Now, essentially what it means here in this context here, somehow we have to bring the fence down around this component, make it easier to be changed. Maybe we can provide some sandboxes where people can do some implementations and testing. Maybe we do that and then we give it to the team, we get the component team, give us some feedback. So essentially the idea is, because since they're a bottleneck, we have to elevate them and basically subordinate everything. So we take as much work away from them as possible so that they can focus on the important work. And these days now, if we talk about a software IT product, technology is there. We have everything in place. So that's not an unsolved problem. It's a challenging problem still because we have to get the infrastructure in place for doing that, but the answers are out there. So essentially, the short answer, or the way I like to talk about this, I always tell people, scale your product, not your Scrum. Now, just throwing more Scrum teams at a problem doesn't solve the problem. You have to find the right level of abstraction, bring the right dependencies together in the context of your product. And the way you can think about identifying your product, I always tell companies, okay, let's go into your lobby. Let's look at those glossy brochures you have there, because this is what you tell people. This is what you associate yourself with as a company. These are your products. So follow the money, essentially, leave your building. If it's an internal product, some other departments are using that. I guess it's a little bit easier because you could just go over there and talk to them and figure out kind of what they really need. So this is a way about how I think about products and how to slice and dice them correctly. Regardless of how you slice and dice it, it will always be wrong. It will never be perfect because there is not the answer. You have to find the answer, essentially, which works best for you. Now, there's some other graphic I just want to show you quickly here. So again, this is the phrase, scale your product, not your Scrum. So the way I like to think about it is the following. Now, if you're here more like on the widget component size, is there value in that? Maybe for someone, but overall, is it really the value you want to have as a company? How would you call it, how you do that? That's a good question. But the further you go onto the move out on the x-axis, at some point you would have a product. At some point you would have a large product. You have to find the right level for you. And then now if you go up on this point, and then you use the diagonal to mirror over to the y-axis. This is kind of gives you a little bit of an idea about how large that whole thing is. Is one Scrum team enough? Do I need to have several Scrum teams working on that? Am I kind of in a nexus or less setup? These are scaling approaches for building big products. And the other way I like to think about it is that the diagonal, kind of the further you move out on the diagonal here, the higher degree of validation is for your product. Because if you know a button works, that's good. That means the button on the steering wheel is what it's supposed to do, but maybe the steering wheel is not properly wired, so the button would still not work in the car. So it's kind of like, if components are working on their own, they might not work in the bigger picture. So the bigger the picture gets, the higher the degree of validation and confidence you can have in your product. That's kind of way as you can think about that. Now, if you bring this over into in your Scrum world, and you can just say, you know what, one product, one development team. Yeah, that's classical Scrum. There's nothing new about that. We know how to do that. Let's say one product, several teams working out of that. So up here you would have then your kind of your smaller product backlog, and you would have one team working out of that. Down here you would have a bigger product backlog, and you probably would have, let me just write out, probably several teams working out of that, and so on. So this is kind of like how we think about scaling. At the end of the day, you only still have one product, which we also have up here. Let's make it smaller. So this is also, so now several products, the portfolio comes into the picture. So what I would expect the company to have is more like a portfolio backlog, where they just say, these are all the things we want to work on, and let's figure out what is the most important thing right now. And then we would give it either into a Scrum team or maybe into a less Nexus teams, and then they would work on that and make it a product, and they would finish up before they move on to the next one. But now if you have several products for one development team, that's when I usually paint this skull, because this is really detrimental. You don't have focus, you don't have commitment. How do you create a sprint goal in a case like that? Oh, let's just be busy. What do you show in a sprint review? When people come to the sprint review, because they wouldn't really see something of interest. So if you're really kind of operating in this area here, you would see so many things going wrong kind of with these elements of Scrum. So that's the beauty about working with Scrum. It gives you the transparency. It shows you what is wrong. It doesn't give you the answer, I'm afraid, but it at least shows you, what doesn't really work properly. I'm just checking the watch here right now. How are we doing? So now let's move over here a little bit, and let me kind of come up with what I call the onion. There's layers upon layers upon layers. So pretty much every company, they usually have a company vision. And based on that, they come up with a business strategy. No surprises here. Now down here in the area where we work with Scrum, we would do our daily planning, our sprint planning, and our release planning. Again, no surprises here. But now what you can see here, there is this gap between what the company wants, what the company thinks, and what we have to do. And the way I like to think about it, the head knows where it wants to go, and the feet would know how to get there, but there is this disconnect. And in our book, Dan and I, we call it the product management vacuum. And maybe you remember from physics, a vacuum has this inner need to fill itself. And if we're not careful, it fills itself with milestones, charters, chapters, and other reports you have to deliver. And essentially all those artifacts you deliver, they are nothing than proving that you follow process compliance. It doesn't tell you anything. Are we doing the right thing? Do we have value? And it drags on for a really long time. And this is where product ownership for us comes into the picture. So let me just take a pen here and say, this is product ownership. So, and the way we think about it is the following. Let me just put a couple of dashed lines in here. So that means as a product owner, you have to have a little bit of reach into the upper layers. If you have a say in there, that's a different question, but you have the chance to ask questions. Why is this important? Would it mean this or that? Could we do it also that way? You would at least have the chance to talk and get questions clarified, get a proper understanding. Because if you haven't understood as a product owner why something is important, the chances of you doing the right thing are really, really small. It would just be busy. Oh, well, this is what people gave me to do. I followed it on time, on scope, on budget. I'm a good guy. That's kind of a different approach we have here. So once you have that understood as a product owner, you could then go ahead and just say, okay, I come up with a product vision. And then you can come up with a product strategy. What we could do for the first release, next release, or maybe how you would approach markets and so on. And then you give it into the team. And this is why the dashed line is actually also going into the sprint, because essentially this is where kind of you together with, as a product owner with the development team, would come up with the sprint goal, and you would explain why it's important, and they would get a chance to ask you the same questions. Why is this important? Could we do this? Would that be possible as well? And based on that, you basically bring it together. In English, there's this word amalgamation. It means you basically bring two things together without having an interface. It's kind of, it just flows into each other. And this is what we want to achieve, because by doing this at the top, the product owner understands what the business wants, and then bring it into the development team. We kind of connect business intention into doing it. And this is how we then basically bridge the product management vacuum. So if you think about that up here, we would say this is all about vision here. Then here we would think about value. And down here about validation, making sure we have done the right thing. Because everything we do, unless we have given it to the customer, it's a theory, it's a hypothesis. Are we doing the right thing? Oh, let's cross our fingers and let's hope for that. So let me just kind of keep on going a little bit further down. So, and we have this thing here, which we like to call, yes, I'm a product owner and I act as a. So this is what I often see is the following. Maybe somebody comes to me and tells me, hey, Ralph, I'm a product owner. And then I say, oh, that's great. Let's talk. I know a little bit about that. And then they tell me, you know what? I just got a thick binder of requirements. And now I'm typing them into Jira as stories, because we work with user stories. And in this case, you would be a scribe. Yeah, you're just kind of busy typing, transferring the knowledge. The next step would be, I would then go to the customer and ask, hey, what do you need? And I would write everything down. And with that information, I would go to the development team or teams and just say, hey, this is what the customer wants. And they would ask me questions, and I would say, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Hang on, but I'll figure it out. And I would go forward and backward, forward and backward, forward and backward. So I would be a pass-through, essentially be a proxy. Now there's an important separation here right now, which I just put in there thick and red. Because now it's getting interesting. So the next step up would be, hey, you know, I know the domain the product is being used in, so I'm a business representative. So I always say, if I would do a medical product, I want my product owner to be a nurse or maybe even a doctor or something like that. I was once at the bank where we were doing a new loan platform, and brilliant product owner. He knew everything about all kinds of loans. He was doing that for over 30 years. But there were situations when he said, instead of this, I'd rather have that. But he couldn't make those calls because he wasn't empowered to shift the budget around. So the next step up would be what we call a sponsor, being in charge of the budget as well. And then there's one step further, which we call the entrepreneurial product owner, entrepreneur. Okay. So now between a sponsor and entrepreneur, I think from a mechanics perspective, like no big difference. From a mental perspective, a lot, because now you're an entrepreneur, you're in charge, you want to be successful. You know, this is a different mindset instead of just doing work I get assigned. Sometimes people tell me, I work for a large company, I can't be an entrepreneur. Not in the technical meaning of it. On the other hand, you could still act like an entrepreneur. You could go out and talk to stakeholders, to users, find out what's important, you know, do all of that. This is kind of what we would like to see. Now, just going back here quickly. Now, on the left-hand side of the red dashed line, you don't even justify your name as a product owner because you get told what to do, you receive. On the other hand, on the right-hand side of the dashed line, things change, yeah? Because now you can really drive the product. You can initiate. And this is why we call this slide I am and I act as a, because what we find out is that most product owners we see these days, they're somewhere here in this area. So, and then the question is, hey, you know, I'm a proxy. How can I become a business representative? Like, and think about it. When do you get promoted in a company? If you do the work the level above. You don't get promoted and thrown into cold water. Now do this. If you have proven yourself that you're capable of doing the work at that level, you get the kick. And it's kind of the same way. Like, you ask and talk to people. You try to get the knowledge. Maybe you read books, go to conferences, and you just try to learn about that and work in that way. And then once you have achieved that, you move further and further. And the interesting thing is, the more you move to the right, the higher you move up in the onion. And the easier it would be to talk to those people and finding out what's really going on. So this goes really hand in hand. So vision, value, validation. Now let's look into vision. And this is a great exercise. I wish I could do that, but it's just time constrained. And the number of people also wouldn't work from a tooling perspective. So this is a great exercise. And let me just explain it to you. And you can just maybe take it then from the morale afterwards, or you can email me or something and I can give you the PDFs of that as well. So essentially, you split the room into two groups. And the half group gets the left-hand side. Draw this 10 blue flowers with 5 petals each, 5 blue, and so on. A kind of clear instruction, clear requirements. There's everything is fine. And the right-hand side, you just give them, the other group of people, hey, draw a beautiful summer meadow with blue and red flowers and a green grass, some cows and birds under a shining sun. Because this scene should remind our customer of the farm they grew up as a child. Okay. So could you stop putting stuff on there? Anyway, so and then you let them draw something. And again, you give them a little bit of a carrot as well. You say, your success will be measured by how closely you match the specs. On the right-hand side, your success will be measured by how happy your customer is. Customer focus again. And then here I have a couple of examples from what happened. So here you can really see, like, those guys were really fulfilling everything. You know, the red flowers, the blue flowers, cows, sun, everything. Here they actually spread it out. You draw this, and they just put the Post-its on there. Here they actually checked off every requirement. Done, 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 done. And well done, team, great. But, you know, then you have this picture here. Now on the right-hand side, you know, you have pictures like that. And some of them are really beautiful. And I even have seen better ones, but I couldn't find the photos anymore. So now if you look in this, and then after you draw this, you ask the people, okay, let's look at the pictures, what the other ones created. And you see suddenly, oh, they look different. Why? And then you just tell them, you know, that wasn't fair. I gave you different things to do. Because the left-hand side, these are your specifications. And where do they usually come from? From a department doing requirements, doing the research apparently. And then they're passed over a document. Now the right-hand side, this is a clear vision. We give people and this is the important sentence here. The scene reminds our customer of their childhood growing up on a farm. Now you can imagine, okay, they were a child on a farm, so how would that look like? What would be important? You know, you can think for them. You can try to understand their feelings, get empathy. And then how many flowers you draw, how many cows you draw, how many patches of black and white the cows have, doesn't really matter anymore. And in the worst case, and this also happens to me during that exercise, they always come to me, are you the child? Have you been the child? So what is important for you? Do you want to have a chimney on the house? Do you want this or that? And they come up with all those questions. They're clarified. And this is where we get customer collaboration over contract negotiation, which we also talk about in the Agile Manifesto. So that's kind of a really interesting exercise. So maybe that's something you could then also do in your company. So this is the thinking about value. Vision, sorry. A good vision should be pragmatic, maybe a little bit emotional, and easy to remember. If you see a vision which is really long sentence and abstract, doesn't really stick in our heads. Our brain doesn't like abstract stuff. Make it more tangible. And then we can go ahead and think about value. So now I'm going to send you back to your breakout rooms for 5 minutes. And I want to ask you, what is value? Now we talked about products provide value. But now I ask you, hey, what is value? Can you just explain it to me? Again, work with your stickies in there in your team room. Just being time. So Bogdan, how are we doing time-wise? So we have another 20, 30 minutes? Okay, cool. So 5 minutes for that exercise. I send you back to your breakout rooms you have been before. I might shift some people around if you're just alone in the room, or if there's some rooms are more crowded than other ones. But what I will be doing right now is I will open the room and we'll give you 5 minutes for this exercise. What is value? Okay, so it looks like everybody is back. Some of you couldn't join a breakout room and we didn't find a way to make you go there somehow. So sorry about that. So value is kind of, it solves a problem, it has a benefit and things like that. And these are all important aspects. And again, these relate much more back to this product thinking than to a project thinking, because you bring your customer into the forefront, you look into that. And I just want to show you something here quickly. And there's a great Harvard Business Review white paper out there, and it's called The Elements of Value, 2016. It's kind of pretty. And this is something I'd like to look at. And it's kind of interesting. It's like a little bit like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like you have functional value at the very bottom. Functional value is fairly easy to reach. It's easier to quantify. People are not willing to pay too much for that. Now, this is often when you have now these freemium products. There's something out there for free, and if you start to use it, you have to pay to get a couple of additional features. So, but they just want you to use them. Now, the next level up is emotional. It reduces anxiety. It helps you to think about wellness, maybe nostalgia. You can watch all the television shows or something like that. A little bit harder to get into that. What is nostalgia? How do you reduce anxiety? That's a little bit harder to quantify, but people are willing to pay more for that. Then life-changing, the next level up. It provides hope, it's self-actualization, or it makes me belong to a specific group and so on. Hello, and this is kind of, and then self-transcendence. Let's not go there right now, but it's kind of an interesting perspective, like which kind of value do you want to achieve with the product you're going to do? And how would you know that it was actually a successful thing you were doing? And the other thing which is important in regards to value, I think you have to differentiate between, I have a green screen behind me, but it doesn't really work. So I just turned the green screen feature up in Zoom. So it's kind of like, I have this really messy picture right now. But you need to differentiate between value creation and revenue extraction. So revenue extraction means you really sell the products and you make as much money as possible with them, which is not the worst thing to do. But if you only do that, at some point, it will deplete and there's nothing else to sell. So at some point you have to come up with the next great product, value creation, which you then can sell again. So you always have to keep the scale kind of in the right balance. Now, what's the next big thing which Apple will bring? That's a good question, I guess. Right now they are selling like crazy, but what's the next big thing? Eventually, people will get tired of their headphones, tired of this and that, and they will stop buying their stuff. So, however, I'm just skimming it quickly. Now, the thing which you really have to do, however, is to make a release. Unless you have no release, everything you do is just a hypothesis. We think this is valuable. And there's a white paper out there from Microsoft where they say 80% of our feature assumptions are simply wrong. And actually 30% of the stuff we've been doing is negatively perceived by the users. So it has negative value. Now, how can you learn quickly? Well, you need to give something to users again and again and again. Maybe you run some A/B tests, maybe use some beta testers or something like that, but bring it out into the market. So in order to have really value in the meaning of something tangible, you need to have a release. And again, this is where good engineering practices and stuff like that come into the picture. I'm just making a little bit space here as well so that I can draw. So now in a classical way, if we think about value, kind of our approach is something like that. So let's say this is our classical waterfall approach. Here we plan everything, then we analyze everything, then we design everything, then we implement everything, then we test everything, and then we release everything, because then at this very end, we actually have our product. But there is this question mark, because we don't know, is this the right product? Well, then we know once you make a release. Now think about Nokia. When the iPhone came out, they were still building good phones because they knew how to build good phones. Nobody wanted them anymore. Nobody bought them anymore. They wanted to use their fingers. So now if you look at the value curve, it looks something like this. It's like a hockey stick. If you're lucky, you go all the way up. Now, this is also the reason why we have then all those checkpoints and milestones in between here, kind of in here, to make sure that, you know, our likelihood about being successful increases. But if you think about it, until here, we create nothing but paper or the electronic equivalent of it. Now, if you work out of a product backlog where you say, you know what, the most important thing is at the top, then the next one, then the next one, and the next one, at least this is how we think about it. And you do everything in a sprint, not just designing something, but you design, analyze, implement, and test. You get a value curve which looks something like that. Okay. Often people tell me then, yeah, but the starting and the end point are the same. And I say, yes, you're right. But if you look, let's just put these guys in here as well. So this is the diagonal. Okay. But now if you look at that, the red line is always trying to catch up, whereas the green line is always above the diagonal. And there's an interesting point here, because this is probably somewhere here. This is when the distance between the diagonal and the green line is the highest. That means on the right-hand side of this point, the slope tips from 1 to less than 1. And mathematically, that means a sprint is probably costing us more than the anticipated return on investment. Maybe we should ask ourselves the question, why are we still doing it? Is it meaningful? Is this money well spent? Maybe it's GDPR or some other laws or stuff like that. The answer is yes, we still have to do it, but it's a conscious decision. But on the other hand, if we really manage to be done at the end of the sprint, wouldn't that be a good moment in time to make a release? And if you think about this, what it means from a cash flow perspective, so because once you start to build something, it costs, and then up here you would go up again. So once you go above the black line, you have kind of this area here, you would have positive cash flow. Now, Scrum doesn't change the fact you would still pay, but you would make a release earlier, and then it would go up. And then at this point, you could then start to work maybe on the next thing, and it would go up, and then the next one. Now, if you overlay all those green areas we have here, you have much more area covered. That means you should probably have, if you do it well, more return on investment, more cash flow. Okay, so this is kind of also a way I can think about that. And the other way is that if you, let me just do this quickly here. say you do that for a product with the green curve, we have something like that, but instead of going all the way, you would stop here. You would collect some feedback, because once you give a product to customers, they come up with new ideas that tell you what they don't like, what they were looking for. So in this point, then you can kind of change your product backlog and make the next one and the next one and so on. So this is really how you can maximize the value. And there's actually a book out there and it talks about what they call exponential organizations. And these are the companies who can basically do those jumps. I'm losing my voice. I've been talking too much all day. Excuse me. So kind of vision, having a clear vision in place. That's what you need. This is what you also really need if you work on a big product where there are many, many teams working on the same thing. This is what I like to refer to as shared mental alignment, because if all the teams have the same understanding about what we are doing and why we are doing something, the chance of bringing everything together and overlap correctly is much, much higher. Once we have that understood, we think about what's the most valuable things we could do. But again, these are just ideas. We have to make a release to really get the thumbs up or maybe the thumbs down to learn about what we have been doing and what's good or not good. And then that brings us to, that's what I want to show you, to validation. So how do you know your product created value? And this is basically, and let's not do an exercise here right now, but again, you have to make a release. You have to essentially do all those activities we expect kind of in regard to the product and basically squeeze it through your release funnel. That's what I like to think about it, release. And now what's on the left-hand side of this funnel? Essentially, it's all product management activities we have in place. Market research, talking to stakeholders, stakeholder management, budgeting, research, A/B tests, lifecycle management, building the product, maintaining the product, and then all of these activities we would have here. And then we bring them kind of through, and then we have a transfer value here. But again, this is not guaranteed value yet. This is like, hey, we think this is valuable. Let's give it a try. Yeah. And if you're capable of running tests frequently, making release frequently, you can learn much, much more often from the market what is right, what is not right, and basically apply that. Now at Scrum.org, we came up with something which is called EBM. It's called evidence-based management. And let me just kind of quickly dive into that for a second. So EBM. And EBM stands for evidence-based management. So management makes lots of decisions every day, which is good. It's important. I mean, decisions have to be made. But every decision has an intention. And then the question is, shouldn't we learn whether this intention was successfully reached? Did we get the impact we were looking for? Can we validate what we were thinking to do? And that means we need to somehow be able to quantify, if we make that, something would change. How could we measure that this actually is changing? And if this is changing in the right direction, yes, we would have the evidence, we were successful. If it would change in the other direction, we would have the opposite of evidence, but we would at least learn this was wrong. And we have like 4 key value areas, how we call them. So we have something which we refer to as current value. It's kind of how are we currently perceived on the market, how happy are our customers, retention rate, and so on. Then at the bottom left, you would have something like called ability to innovate.
Sorry, Ralph, just position.
Sorry, yeah. Ability to innovate. How innovative can we actually be? Time to market. And then on the top left, we have something which we call unrealized value. And they're kind of a little bit of intertwined, but let's not go too much into detail here. There's something which called the EBM guide. You can just Google EBM guide and you will get a explanation of that stuff as well. So let's put this line in here. So kind of these guys, again, they're somewhat intertwined. So current value is really about the current market standing. And you know, I always ask people, oh, great, so you have a software product. Do you know which features are used, which features aren't used? No. Wouldn't that be good information? Because I think if you learn which features are used, this would give you a much better understanding what people really need. And again, there was the studies done by Standish Group a while ago, but you know, they found out that 45% of the features are not really used at all, 19% rarely, 16% sometimes, 20% always and often. So these 20% is really like the meat on the bone. This is what we want to do. And this is like, if you think about the value curve, this is like the steep slope in the beginning and then it flattens out. So let's figure that out. Let's build those capabilities into your product. And as a product owner, that's important for me. I always tell people, give me the numbers I need, build that into your product somehow. Well, if you host the product, it's easy. You can just do it. If it's software which is installed on a customer machine, it's maybe a mobile device, that's when you always get the pop-up. Would it be okay to see your usage data so that we can improve the product? No, this is exactly for that reason. So this is kind of where you can look into that in regards to the current value. Now with ability to innovate, let me just talk about those numbers here quickly, is that, let's say you have a budget of 100%, 19% are used for expanding your capabilities. That means software server licenses, maybe cloud services and other things. So that's 18% it is, sorry about that, 18%. So there's maybe some room for squeezing something out, but not that much anymore. This is kind of pretty much like a commodity market, I don't know, but these days. But then 53% of the budget you have, you spend on support and maintenance, and this is industry average. I always had clients that told me, oh, that's not too bad, we have 70%. So 53% in industry average of the money just disappears because you need to fix stuff which you didn't do in the right way beforehand. So do you want to bring maintenance down to zero? No. You want to have people taken care of if picking up the phone if a customer calls and has a problem. But if we manage, so there's a word which I like to call, which is called failure demand. So every time a customer calls you because they have a problem with your product, this is failure demand. They are just telling you indirectly, I don't get it. Please help me. Now, if you manage to bring this failure demand down, and let's say out of those 53%, 30% is failure demand, which is actually a low number, it's usually much, much higher, but let's say 30%. If you can bring this, maybe half this failure demand, bring it down to 15%, that would mean you could have 15% more innovation. Because right now, if you subtract 18% and 53% from 100, that means you have 29% for innovation. That's less than a third, or all of your money goes towards innovation. Now, if you take that thought and you just say, you know what, from all our money, let's say 100,000 euros, 29,000 go towards innovation for new features, and actually only 20, 30% of those features are really used. You're suddenly going down to about 10,000 euros, kind of, ouch. You know, this is something where all the money disappears. And then let's look at something else like time to market. You know, we want to have dedicated development teams only working for one product because this forms a really good team. They know their product, they understand the market, they essentially reverse engineer the market if they work long enough in that field. They're good, they perform. And so instead of thinking in products, I'd rather, instead of thinking in projects, I'd rather think in products. But I might even go a step further and say, I want to think in a team I have trust in to build me a product. So this is what we refer to as the on-product index. And every time the people in the team have to work on different things than their main product, they get distracted. And what we usually observe is that people lose 20% or even more, but in average it's about 20% of their capabilities through task switching, being distracted from what they're supposed to do. Now, if you take 20% from those, ever 10,000 euros being left over, we're down to 8,000 euros. So only out of 100,000, probably only 8,000 is really valuable for you as a company. I mean, this is just like rough numbers, but it gives you an idea about where money disappears. So this is something to look into. Now, unrealized value. This is looking ahead. No, and this is again, I think, as a good product owner, you should see technology trends. You should understand them. You shouldn't be an expert in everything, but you should at least know, hey, there is something coming up. 3D printing. In China and in other places, they print houses. They print 10 houses a day these days. It's like, wow, cool. Somebody thought, hey, if we make the right mixture for cement and then concrete, we could print houses. And they played around with that, and now they can do that. It's mostly like for low-income areas where people don't have really money, so they can just print their houses. They look all the same, but they're fairly cheap to produce at some point. Another thing, and sometimes what I see is that companies, they're like standing in a pond which is full of fish, and they look down and they just grab those fish and they find more and more. But there is this big wave coming, and they don't see it because the head is always down, and then whoosh, they get washed away. And this is what these days we talk about, disruptive technologies, and things are changing suddenly, and you're not prepared for that, and you just get overrun by it. Now, there's a great book out there. It's called Project to Product. And in there, he describes Mikkel something. I can't remember his whole name. But he describes like certain technology advances we had, like the first industrial revolutions when we came up with the steam engine. Now, suddenly somebody invented the steam engine so they could power something. It took about 50 years until people really understood it and how they made it work for them in their bigger environment. Now, suddenly, instead of having this local weaver or blacksmith or something like that, in a town, you had those big halls where people were kind of doing it on the assembly line, really high labor, cheap labor, high output, and something like that. So from the invention of the steam engine until it became mainstream, it was about 50 years, and then there was 10, 15 years transition period. But after that, the market changed. There were the big halls and all the weavers and blacksmiths, and what you had, they basically disappeared pretty much because they didn't have a standing there anymore. They couldn't compete. Now suddenly you had all those goods. That's when the train and canal mania came up, and people kind of, we have to transport all this goods, and we have to get the raw materials. It took another 15 years until we understood how this works, and then bang, it happened again. And then the industry shifted again dramatically. Then around just after the 19th century, when Ford discovered how to build cars, when Ford came up with the Model T, there were 300 car manufacturers in the Detroit area. And now there's only a handful left over, and many of them, they're not faring too well either. Again, it took a couple of years, bang, and then this happened in this, how to build cars on an assembly line. And some companies knew how to do that, other ones didn't. Now, let's take that thought. Now, for 50 years, we have computers. Or 50 years ago, we invented the first transistor. Now we have computers. We have tablets. We have Internet of Things. We have the cloud. Now suddenly this thing is there. It is ready to be used in a really much more meaningful way. And people are negotiating about when the transition period started for computers. Was it 2007, 2010, 2015? Doesn't really matter, but there's now a time frame, and the clock is ticking. Maybe it's another 10 years, maybe it's another 5 years, but then the dice have been rolled, and then there are the companies who have understood how technology works, the new one. They will leverage it, they will do really well, and the other ones, they will slowly disappear. And this is what we commonly refer to as digitalization these days. It's just something which was supposed to happen for a long time. Now it's happening. Cope with it. And there's a nice quote of Peter Drucker. Now he said, change is not required because survival is not mandatory. And this is where many, many companies are these days, and some are getting really frantic about jumping onto the agile bandwagon to be in a good position. But if you do it for the wrong reasons, if your mindset is not in the right place, probably won't work on the other end. So this is kind of where we really want to make sure that we somehow establish mechanisms to quantify, are we actually doing the right thing? Can we validate that we created value? So let me just mention one more thing on here, or actually two more things. I don't want to be lying. Is that now what we have up here, this has more like a market focus. Kind of how are we standing in the market, and how is kind of people buying our products? Are people happy with that? Now at the bottom, this is more our capabilities. So what do I mean with that? So, and this is not a second point. Let me just jump back here right now. And let me first do this and start again. So what we have here on the top hand, this is mostly what we refer to as lagging. And the way you can think about that is you can't lose weight. This is not an activity. You can't just say, well, I'm losing weight. No, you can exercise more. You can eat less. You can do other things. And this is what you do leading. So leading. Now, let's say your current value is decreasing because the quality of your product is going down. There's too many bugs, it crashes, people lose data, maybe they're on forums, people say bad things about your product and so on. So your current value is decreasing. So now this is hard facts. Now you have to think about what could we do to change that leading. Because usually what we do is on a strategic level, we are really good on a strategic point. We have solved COVID, not the problem. Now we have to make it happen. On a strategic level, each one of us is soccer world champion because we know exactly what's going on wrong. But how do we make sure it happens in the right way? This is the point, like execution, doing the real thing. And this is leading. This is where you have to think about that. Let's say going back, customer happiness is going down, the quality of the product is decreasing. So now we can think about, okay, ability to innovate. How much money do we spend on bugs? How many bugs do we have? Maybe you start to bring down the number of bugs by increasing your test automation. Maybe you start to do code reviews or some other tools, Sonar, to measure your code metrics or something like that. And these are all things you could do upfront, leading and measure them. And if you were right, lagging, your customer happiness should go up again, or at least not get worse as it is. And then you would have the evidence, yes, our assumptions were right. And then you can think about the next thing to do, Okay, and this is the big challenge because pretty much all of the things what companies measure are lagging. Once a year, you see how you've been doing. Maybe you bring it down to once a quarter or once a month, but it's always at the end of the month. What could you do all month long to change those numbers at the end, upfront? That's kind of another way you can think about that. And by doing and by improving your capabilities internally, how you leverage your infrastructure, how you build it up, how you use the technology, improve your technology, this would then help you to improve your position on the market. And that's it. That was my quick presentation about demystifying the product owner role. Are there any questions? Everybody's still on mute, so I don't think so. Don't be shy.
Okay, let's break the ice. I have one interesting question. So it basically comes to, what do you do about highly regulated industries? You mentioned medical and stuff like that, where you really got that law-giving gatekeeper.
Yeah. Now, in the context of Scrum, I mean, I have a little bit of experience with FDA-regulated work. This was back basically when I was working at the same company with Keith a long time ago. So that's when your definition of done becomes important, where you just say, no, these are the things you have to have in place. And so now going through this approval process, that's expensive. That's nothing you can probably do every sprint. Every 2 weeks, you couldn't just afford that. But you could still do every sprint what is required to get there. And you can just say, maybe right now would be a good moment in time to make this release, or you think in 3 months would be a good moment to make a release. So let's now take this product we have and go through this process and get it approved, essentially.
So Ralph, may I add something to that?
Yeah, yes, please, Keith. I was hoping that you would pitch in. Thank you for that.
There's a specific paper called AMI, AAMI, TIR 45, which is an FDA consensus standard on how to do agile with medical devices. And that.
Okay.
that aligns with what Ralph was saying. So it's a very good cheat sheet on how to do agile in a regulated environment like that.
Okay.
We've used it extensively.
Great. Could you put that into the chat window, the name of the document, so that everybody has it? And I'd like to look at it as well, because this question comes up. And there's a book out there from Nancy van der Schoenewaard and someone else, and she wrote a book about that. So eventually I got the book. I haven't read it yet, but I looked in the table of contents, and it seems to be pretty generic about Agile in general and a little bit here and there, but maybe the paper which Keith just recommended would be great.
Yeah, so the thing I like about the consensus standard is we've lifted terms out of that for our software development lifecycle documentation. So when we get audited, by using the exact terms the FDA are familiar with, it becomes a lot smoother.
Okay.
You don't need some Babel fish that has your proprietary terms going in one ear and FDA terms coming out the other.
Okay. Great. Thanks. That's brilliant. Cool. So one question has hopefully been answered. Anything else?
By the way, just a short comment on that book you just mentioned. Authors are there arguing that you could use a product owner committee or multiple product owners.
For FDA compliancy?
And generally speaking, yeah, in medical. I went through the book, it's okay.
Okay, okay, the one from Nancy van der Schoenewaard you mentioned? Okay, okay. Are you working in that field?
That's our pain.
Okay. Any other questions? So that's interesting for me. So either did a really good job explaining everything, or I did a really horrible job and nobody has no clue to even ask a question. I get a thumbs up that at least something. I don't know.
I just had one. I had a comment. I loved the exercise that you showed. It's eye-opening, and I think it would be an interesting exercise to do with, especially I am in a regulated industry, and it really points to how people can get lost in the weeds and in focusing on the details, and what you really want is the big picture.
Yeah, yeah, yes. And this really goes back to having a clear vision. And you know, there's Uber. I think most of you know what Uber is, and they have this vision. We want to make transport as easily available as tap water. Because everywhere you go and you see a tap, let's say in most Western countries, you know, you can drink it, it's safe, and it's there. You can just wash your face, cook with it, and something like that. It's just, we want to say the same thing for transport. And it gives you a clear understanding. It's really simple. It's just this one sentence.
I have one question. Is it okay to change product owner from time to time?
Why would you want to change the product owner?
I will give you the context. It's from my friend's question. In the organization where he worked, they have a group of project managers, about 8 of them, which they have transferred to product owners in agile transition process. They have multiplied products for which they are responsible. Is it okay to change product owner after some time if he or she has a greater interest for another product, then she or he transfer her responsibility for current products to other product owner? How often is capable to do that?
Standard answer, being kind of on the road a lot with clients, it depends. I mean, you know, if this person really desperately wants to do something new, there's this new product that really, there's their heart in there. If you hold them back, they probably get annoyed, frustrated, that maybe the quality would go down anyway. So it could make sense. I mean, for me, product owner is really the way I think about it, Scrum Master is a role. Someone could be Scrum Master and something else. For me, product owner is a function. You are product owner. You get hired as a product owner. And we talked about that in the once when the other ones when the breakout room as well. We consider a product owner to be a product manager who thinks and acts in an agile way, to really bring all this information into the people doing the work, not just throwing a document over a wall. Now, that's important work, and now shuffling the people around all the time bears some risks. It could be meaningful to do so. So again, I think long answer, short answer is it depends. So I wouldn't object it, but I would be careful about when to do it and how often to do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, can I ask you a question? So basically you just mentioned the quote I wanted to use in order to ask my question. So I've heard too many times that essentially a product owner is an agile product manager. And I wanted to hear your thoughts about that kind of relation. If a company can handle essentially and can support the product owner to be the product manager essentially, or when there are situations that you would have a product manager and a product owner working together. And from your experience and how this would look successful in the Scrum framework essentially, and also having in mind that scale of the product ownership is that we talked about being described, the proxies.
Okay, so let's kind of look into the first question. So we have essentially one role in Scrum, and this goes also back to our scaling thinking. We say for one product, there's one product owner and one product backlog. Okay. Now, I've seen places where they had two product owners working together, and they basically were like mental twins. They really they collaborated well. It just worked. So I mean, I think the advice is there is only one product owner per product, and if you change that, it bears some risks. If you have more people, now if you go back to having a steering board or something like that, getting decisions, because that's the other benefit about having one product owner. I could just go and say, Yannis, I have a question. We could do it this or that way. Well, we didn't talk about that, so now I need to make a decision. So what do you think? And we would talk, and he would give an answer. Now, if I have a steering board, I would have to bring everybody on the table, and maybe that would happen next week. They would talk a lot, and maybe then the decision is, well, we don't have a decision yet. Let's meet next week again or next month or something. And this is kind of how you lose time. So that's another benefit about having one product owner. But as we have learned from Spider-Man, with power comes responsibility. Now, if you are the one product owner, you are accountable for the product. If there is something wrong with your product, it's your head on the chopping block. There's no excuses anymore. You cannot point fingers because you had all the right to make all the decisions. And I think this means that now going back to this product manager, product owner thing, is that, we want to have this one person, and they should be maybe to some degree stubborn, very strong opinionated and everything. Otherwise, if they always flex and say, if you mean yes, let's do that. If they would just try to make everybody happy, and maybe it's probably the wrong thing. So this is where for us product management comes into the picture. Now, having a product manager who is really good in his or her field about managing products, maybe thinking about all the initiatives we should start, marketing, research, and having a good product owner who is able to basically take that information and bring it into the team could work. I wouldn't possibly object it, but I see risks. Okay.
Cool. Thank you for the answer.
Anything else? Okay, I guess that would be it pretty much. So I give it back to you, Bogdan. I'm not sure what your closing ceremony is.
Well, our closing ceremony is minimal. So first of all, I would like to thank you for a great meetup. I personally enjoyed it a lot, and at least for me, it's answered some questions. So I hope others find it as useful. And I would like to invite people to come and join us next Wednesday, when we'll be having another talk on the visualization and on how to use Picaboo technique. So until next Wednesday, see you, enjoy, and have a great week, guys.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.